Hi, this is Steve Dale, and I'm recording this on January 10th, 2021. And this is the last of a series of programs I'm doing called Prop 19 and Planning for a Loved One with a Disability. Um, anyway, as we reviewed in the other programs, the following is for education purposes only and not meant as a substitute for legal counseling. Many of the rules being discussed here are subject to changes in interpretation. And also, these situations tend to be very complex. So, really, um, this should help you identify issues here so that when you meet with your tax or legal professional, you can do it based on having some knowledge of what the issues are. So, two major changes are taking place. One are changes to the parent-child exclusion, and the other is changes to the transfer of taxable value for certain property owners. Dates here are that for the parent-to-child and grandparent-to-grandchild exclusion, they're operative on February 16th, 2021. The base year value transfer provisions here become operative for on April 1st, 2021. A lot of the materials I'm going to be presenting come from the Board of Equalization, which I have found to be very useful here. And you can find those materials by going to www.boe.ca.gov/prop 19. So, a couple of things to review before we jump in. One is, and one of the things I really do like about the materials is that they give us these charts and examples and all sorts of things. So, under the parent to child and grandparent to grandchild exclusion here, a principal residence can be transferred under current laws as they are today prior to enactment, and can include the principal residence of the transfer or with no value limit. Okay, under Prop 19, the principal residence can be transferred, but it has to be the principal residence of the transferor and the transferee. The value limit of current taxable value so, as this chart points out, under current law, a principal residence could be transferred here with no value limit here. And the receiver here, the child would receive the lower property tax. And by the way, would be able to use the property as a rental here. Under Prop 19, the principal residence, it has to be the principal residence of the transferor and the transferee, so you can no longer use it as a rental. And the value limit of the current taxable value plus $1 million as annually adjusted would be the new property tax rate. Also, it does include family homes and can include farms. Other property under the current law is that you can transfer up to $1 million of other property. That could be rental property. That could be a second home that was bought for your child with a disability that's not your primary residence, or it could be a vacation home. Under Prop 19, it eliminates the exclusion of other real estate and really allows this only for the principal residence. As far as the grandparent to grandchild generational changes here, there is virtually no change, so that stays the same. Filing periods do change. Under the old law, you had 3 years to file the claim here, and under the new law, that's limited only to 1 year. And as this points out, the current law will sunset on February 15th, 2021, and Prop 19 will become the law of the land effective February 16th, 2021. Now, one thing that comes up here is what is considered a child. Okay, so in accordance with the BOE, and once again, you can look this up by going to that link. A child, for purposes of Proposition 58, which deals with the transfers, includes any child born of the parents. Well, that makes sense. Any stepchild while the relationship of this step-parent and stepchild exists. Any son-in-law or daughter-in-law of the parents, and any adopted child who is adopted before the age of 18. So you can't pass this on to a buddy here by just adopting them. You'd have to adopt them before they turn the age of 18. So that planning opportunity is gone. A couple of interesting things. Spouses of eligible children may also be eligible until divorce if terminated by death, until remarriage of the surviving spouse, step-parent, or parent-in-law. So that's pretty liberal. A person adopted after reaching the age of 18 is not considered a child for purposes of the parent-child exclusion. Okay, let's review the portability rules here for people that, which the new rules will limit it to people that are 55 years of age, severely disabled, or a victim of a wildfire or natural disaster. So once again, as far as the type of property and timing, that has not changed. One big change is as far as location is concerned of the replacement home. Under current law here, it has to be in the same county, although there are 10 counties that have inter-county ordinances that allow transfer from one county to another. That will be out the window, and this will open it up to anywhere in California. As far as value limits, here currently it's any property equal or lesser in value with these stages that are listed here. Under the new law, it will be any value, but any amount above 100% is added to the transferred value. And we went through examples of that in the last video. How many transfers can you make? Under current law, you can only do that one time here. And under Proposition 19, you can do it 3 times. And as far as implementation, the portability rules will be implemented here on April 1st, 2021. So let's talk a little bit about capital gains taxes. Here in a concept called step-up and basis. And for many folks, this is going to be somewhat of a balancing act. So for many that might be considering transferring property before February 16th in order to make the transfer under the old rules, this is an issue that you should talk about with your tax advisors. Example, assume Bob and Mary Smith want to transfer a real property worth $800,000 with a very low property tax to Kathy in a special needs trust and have the income from the property used to support her needs. That's something that's not that uncommon. After February 16th, 2021, this transfer will not qualify for the parent-to-child exclusion because it is neither the primary residence of Kathy or her parents, and the transfer after that date will trigger the property taxes to full market value. So that's something that might motivate making the transfer before the February 16th date. So let's assume the property is worth $800,000, but the tax basis here of the property is $100,000. If the parents were to transfer the property into Kathy's special needs trust after either of them passes, the property would be revalued at date of death value to $800,000. And if sold immediately after the death of the parent, of either parent, then the property would have no capital gains. Oftentimes, this is a reason for parents to hang on to property and only pass it after they pass away. If the property were transferred before either parent passed, the basis of the property would be $100,000. And if it were sold immediately, the gain subject to tax would be $700,000. Bob and Mary must decide whether it's better to transfer the property to Kathy's Special Needs Trust to lock in the low property tax basis, or transfer the property upon the death of either of them, have the property's taxes revalued, but preserve the step up in basis. The answer for Bob and Mary may be vastly different than your situation. These are really individualized discussions. Now, because of the complexity of it, I haven't really included it in this program, but there is a concept called defecting the trust, where it might be possible to put it in an irrevocable trust and put specific language in it that is recognized by the IRS that would get that second step up in basis. If the capital gains taxes are a major concern, an irrevocable trust may include language that could qualify the property in the trust for a step up in basis through a concept called defecting the trust. And that's really beyond the scope of this presentation. So, also to keep in mind here, the IRS typically does allow you to exclude up to $250,000 of capital gains on real estate if you're single, and this would be if the property is sold, and $500,000 of capital gains tax if you're married and filing jointly. Remember, this is for real estate that you live in, but you must live in the house at least 2 years before selling it. So here's a question. Can an irrevocable special needs trust qualify for the parent-to-child exclusion? So once again, our guidance comes from the BOE here from this memo. So let's go through a couple of things. So there were a couple of questions. One was, are transfers of real property through the medium of a trust eligible for a parent-to-child exclusion? And the answer is yes. For the property tax purposes, we, the BOE, look through the trust to determine who has the present beneficial interest. So for instance, if we have a trust, and if the trust is for the specific benefit of, let's say, Kathy, here, the fact that the house is owned by the trust, they'll look through the trust and look at whether or not Kathy has the beneficial interest, and that would qualify her for the parent-to-child exclusion. The other question is, can an irrevocable trust qualify for the exclusion? And through this memo, it answered a series of questions. So, the parent-to-child exclusion applies to transfers of real property interest into irrevocable trusts that are for the sole benefit or one or more children of the eligible transferred parent, even though the transferee has the discretion to accumulate income and principal. So once again, and it may be prudent, possibly not required, but it may be prudent to put language in that any property held in the trust for residential needs of the beneficiary is for the sole benefit of that child. So, a transfer of property to an irrevocable trust or to a revocable trust followed by a transfer to a beneficiary who is a child can qualify for the parent-to-child exclusion. So once again, what this tells us is if you're holding the property in your trust, whether it's a revocable trust or it might be in a what's called a bypass trust, an irrevocable trust, it still will qualify for the parent-to-child exclusion. So let's go through a couple of housing scenarios. Let's go through number one. Parents passing a residence to Child Special Needs Trust on the death of the parent. So we'll call this one Ellen's story here. And let's say John, who is the single parent of Ellen, and Alan has a significant developmental disability. John has always been concerned about the residential needs of Alan and has created an estate plan which includes passing the assets for the benefit of Alan in a special needs trust upon his death. It's expected that Alan will likely live with John in the family home for the rest of his life. Now, I will tell you, many folks have this plan. Is it going to be practical? It's really hard to say. Time will tell. When John passes away, the property tax on the home was based on a valuation of $200,000, but the market value is $1.3 million. Since the home was the residence of the parent and will also be the residence of the child, the transfer to the Special Needs Trust will qualify for the parent-to-child exclusion under Prop 19. On John's date of death, the property has a market value of $1.3 million. So going through the calculations here that was given to us in the first video, we're going to calculate the sum of the factored base value, which is the property tax value, plus $1 million. So our calculation there is that the property tax value was $200,000. We add $1 million to that. That brings us to $1.2 million. Determine whether the assessed value exceeds the sum of the factored based year value here plus $1 million. In this case, $1.3 million is greater than $1.2 million. So we would calculate the difference, which is $100,000. Therefore, we would take the factored base year value and add $100,000 to that. And so the taxes would be based on $300,000. Now, if this was done under the old rules, then the full amount would qualify here. But in this case, we're under Prop 19, we're going to need to add $100,000 to the factor-based year's value here. So we're still getting quite a discount, but it isn't as good as it would have been under the old rules. So in this scenario here, we're going to talk about a home that's purchased for a child with a disability that's intended to go into a special needs trust, but it's not the parent's primary residence, okay? And you might remember when we looked at the old rules, you could pass up to $1 million of other property here, and that is going to go away on February 16th unless there's a delay. Jacob and Irene have a daughter named Judy. Okay, 10 years ago, they purchased a condo for her, which they have adapted for her needs with the intention of passing it to her special needs trust when the second of them pass as her residence. The property has a property tax base of $200,000 with a present market value of $600,000. Under pre-Prop 19 rules, the property could pass to her special needs trust because it's less than $1 million as other property, since the condo is not the residence of the parents. Any transfer after February 15th is going to be subject to Prop 19, and her special needs trust will be valued at full market value. The property in the special needs trust will be valued at full market value since it's not the residence of the parents. Her parents could either transfer the property into an irrevocable special needs trust prior to February 15th and preserve the property tax rate, or transfer the property later or upon their deaths, but the property upon transfer would be subject to property tax revaluation based on full market value. So if done immediately, the present value is $600,000. If the transfer is made at death, then it's going to be whatever the market value is at the time. Let's go to our last scenario, which is a transfer of the parent's residence and rental properties to provide for a child with a disability. Now, you know, many times the residence of the parents is going to be much larger than is necessary for a child with a disability. And it's not uncommon that we pass the property anyway as a rental partially because under the current laws, you can make a parent-to-child transfer, but you might remember when we went through the materials here, the new requirement is that the property has to be used as the residence of the child receiving it. So really, if the property is used as a rental, it's going to go through a full revaluation. So Roberta and Janice have a son named Blaine who is visually impaired and was adopted by them before he was the age of 18. Okay, so their plan upon their deaths was to have the residence used as a rental in a special needs trust. The plan also includes leaving him a rental in a special needs trust with the intention of using the rent to cover Blaine's expenses. The rental property has a current value of $1.5 million with a factored base value of $300,000 and a capital gains tax basis of $250,000. The family residence has a factored base value of $400,000 with a market value of $1 million. If the rental property were transferred prior to February 15th, 2021, the property taxes would not increase since the factored base value of the property is less than $1 million and it's going to qualify as other property here. The basis for capital gains tax and depreciation would be $250,000, the basis of the property when transferred. If the property were transferred after February 16th or when the parents passed, the property taxes would be either based on fair market value at the time here, or the property would be based on fair market value at the time of the transfer. The basis of the property would be stepped up to full market value if passed to the special needs trust upon either parent's death, and the rental property could be depreciated from the stepped up value. The home that Roberta and Janice also intend to leave to be used as a rental would not qualify for the parent-to-child transfer because, once again, in this case, he has no intention of living in the home. So that would have to, the property taxes would be increased based on fair market value. So they'd want to take that into consideration here with their planning. So what families, and this is really not meant to be to cover every single scenario here, but who are folks who should be seriously looking at transferring or at least considering transferring property now? Parents, and in some limited situations, grandparents that plan on leaving property that is not the family residence of for the benefit of their child with a disability. If the property taxes are a very low basis, you might want to consider making the transfer before that deadline. Parents and in limited situations, grandparents that are looking to leave their family residence for the benefit of a child or grandchild where the value of the property is greater than the current tax base plus $1 million. Although in many situations that's going to be very difficult here, especially if the parents intend to live in the house here until they pass away. Parents, and in limited situations, grandparents, who plan on leaving investment property for the benefit of their child with a disability so they can lock in the low property taxes based on here as other property here. So one last thing to consider before we close out today is that one possibility might be that instead of leaving the home directly to your child with a disability, here, deal with all this property tax stuff, is to leave it for the use of your child here, but in the end, leave it to a nonprofit. Now, I'm leaving this information up here because the Lanterman Housing Alliance has a special program called Legacy Homes, where in specific situations, you can leave your home to legacy homes with your child being able to live in it until they pass away here. And then the home would be used in perpetuity for persons with disabilities. This would be especially appealing to families who really want to help other families that have housing issues here. And really, and many times being part of the disability community really touches one's soul. And so in that case, if what one thing you just might consider is leaving the home for the use of the child through the legacy home program. And then when the child passes away, here the house would remain to provide for other persons with disabilities in perpetuities. The last thing to mention real quick is that there's a lot of confusion right now dealing with Prop 19. And because of COVID, and also because many law offices are pretty much slammed at this point, so it's getting to be very difficult to make an appointment here to deal with these situations. Many programs, including the ARC of California, are very much looking at Prop 19 and how it affects the disability community. And we may be looking at folks to work with us to, if for nothing else, to at least delay the implementation of the rules having to do with the parent and child transfer, and maybe carve out a few other benefits for persons with disabilities here. Housing for all Californians is difficult, but I will tell you, in California, housing here is safe and housing for persons with disabilities is a real problem in California. And this is something that really deserves more attention. And my hope is that not only will this stimulate you looking at your own situation, but also let's look at policies and laws in California to try to help persons with disabilities and seniors with their housing issues. For instance, I would love to see an exception made that if you leave a property intended for the residential needs of a person with a disability, for instance, in a special needs trust, that it qualify for the parent to child benefits, so long as the child lives in the house. And once the child passes away or moves from the house, then have it revalued at that time here. Something to consider is not only is there this need out here, but my personal feeling, just as an advocate, is, when a parent steps up to the table and assists their child with a disability to provide for their housing needs, in many cases, this takes the burden off the taxpayer. And my personal feeling is that those parents do deserve to be rewarded here and to make the path easier. But with that, this is Steve Dale signing out here. And I hope this has been helpful. Otherwise, happy advocating.